Apparo Solutions. Planning example, the making of. In this tutorial video we will show you, step by step, how to create the planning use case example. In the first part, we show how to distribute the year's total over the remaining months, and how to recalculate the year's total based on the entries in the single months. In the second part, we show how to set past months to read only. Before we start, you should know that each widget has its own JavaScript selector ID. This is based on the widget order, and starts with 0. So the second widget has the ID 1, and so on. You can copy it by clicking this button. So the third widget has the ID 2. And widget number 14 has the ID 13. We go to Features, and activate client-side JavaScript. In the left menu, the menu item, Automatic Scripts and Database Procedures appears. Here we can make the necessary calculations. Let's start with the basics. We need two Apparo JavaScript methods for the calculation. The first one is getAFETableWidgetValue with the parameters sourceElement and targetElementSelector. This is used to read the widget's value. The second method is setAFETableWidgetValue with the parameters sourceElement, targetElementSelector, and newValue. This is used to write values into the widgets. Additionally, there are the methods get and set AFETableWidgetStringValue to read and write string values, and the methods get and set AFETableWidgetNumValue to read and write numeric values. Since we want to calculate with our values, we use the method for numerical values. We start with the event trigger, document on change. This will start an action when something in the document has been changed. In our example, the action should start when the widget value, with the ID of our yearly sum, has been changed. And the action that has to be started is the function we are entering now. The function content starts after the curly bracket. We define the variable, myValue, and fill it with the value from the widget for the yearly sum. Here we use the method getAFETableWidgetNumValue. It requires two parameters. First, the source element, which is the easiest part in this script. The source element is always this. This points to an element in the same row. The second parameter is the targetElementSelector. This is the JavaScript ID of our widget, so we copy it, and insert it here. Then we need more variables. We define the variable currentDate, and fill it with the current timestamp. The next variable is current month. We calculate the current month from the current date with the function getMonth. Since getMonth would return 0 for January, we add another +1 here, so January will be 1 then, and December 12th. Then we need another variable containing the months that are left in the current year. The calculation is simple, 13 minus the number of the current month. In the next step, we have to calculate the sum of the values in the past. We define the variable, sum of past, and assign the value 0. This is the case if the current month is January. If the current month number is greater than, or equal to 2, that is February, the sum of the past contains only the value of the month January. We read this value with the get method, followed by the parameters this, for the current row, and the JavaScript selector ID, from the month January. This code now adds the value of the month January to the variable sum of past, but only if the month is in the past. We copy-paste this row, and adapt it for the next month. We increase the month, and the selector ID by 1, and add another sum of past, for the previous month's values. And copy-paste this calculation for the next month. Everything works without button click, but optionally buttons can be used for this purpose too. We repeat these steps for all months until November. After that, we can start the next step. We change the values of all months that are not in the past. We define the variable calc value, which takes the annual amount, subtracts the sum of the past, and divides by the number of months remaining. We copy the first line from the last block, and simply adapt it for our needs. If the current month is equal 1, which means January, we remove sum of past, and change the method to set AFE table widget num value. Set as widget value in this row, in the widget with the ID 2, the value of the calculation, calc value. We copy-paste this line again, and adapt it. If current month is smaller, or equal to 2, then set the calculated value in widget with ID 3, which means February. We repeat this step for all remaining months, and adapt month number and selector ID. Before we can close the first block, we have to insert a calculation that calculates the annual total from all months. Otherwise, we could get different amounts due to rounding. We create the function for this at the very end. Calculate year sum for this row. We close this block, and continue with the functions that change the yearly total as soon as the user modifies the value of a month. We need a document on change event for every month, and we can copy this command from the very beginning of our script. If the value of the widget with selector ID 2, which is January, has been changed, then call the function calculate year sum. We now create an event for each month, and increase the ID by 1 each time. Last but not least, we create the function calculate year sum with the parameter element. The name of the parameter can be freely chosen. We define the variable yearly sum, which will sum up all monthly values, and fill it with the value of the month January, using again the method getAFE table widget value. With the source element and target element selector with ID 2, which is the January. The next steps are easy. Year sum is equal to year sum, plus the value of the next month. We repeat this for each month, and increase the selector ID by 1. We have now added up all the monthly values, and can then write back the calculated annual total, again with the method setAFE table widget num value. With the source element, the target selector ID of the year widget, which has ID 1, and setting the value, year sum. We close this script, and can now check the result. The current month, at the time of recording, is April, therefore the annual total is correctly distributed over the months April to December. Past months are empty, but not yet write protected. And when changing the value in April, the value of the annual sum is recalculated. To make past months write protected, we have to change the widget settings. Under Features we find the setting, Read Only in Edit and Inserting Area, with the selection, If Variable Returns True. At the moment there is no such variable, so we create it first. We switch to the Variables menu, and click on Add. Then we select Script Variable. We define the result variable, which will contain the true string later. We also define current date and fill it with the current timestamp. Then we define current month and fill it with the number of the current month, as shown in the beginning of this video. To keep this variable as simple as possible, we will check here for January only. If 1 is smaller than the current month, then result must be true. True values must always be enclosed in single quotes. The last line is returning the result. We can copy this variable for each month until November, and use as condition for February, 2 is smaller than current month. March will be, 3 is smaller, and so on. We switch back to the main settings, and enter the edit view of the widget January. We set it to read only, and assign the just created variable. We run the business case again, and now January is write protected. Chapter 2. The use of variables, extending the monthly calculations. The year's total is evenly distributed over all months that are not in the past. In some cases, however, special circumstances, such as seasonal fluctuations, or event-based pre-orders, must also be taken into account. In this video we show the best approach. Due to the New York Marathon in November, there are pre-orders above the usual quantity. Instead of entering them manually, such pre-orders should be added automatically. The same applies to seasonal fluctuations. To keep this script as simple as possible, we will use variables for the calculations. Basically, variables can be used here, but no widget reference variables, and also no others, with reference to the current line. This affects most SQL variables too. In our example, we focus on the month of October. To work around these client-side JavaScript limitations, we will create and use hidden widgets. We switch to Main Settings, and click on the Widgets tab. We click on Add, and select Edit Widget. As widget type we use label with variables, because this widget does not need an own database column. As value we enter the variable leverage, which will be created later. We confirm with OK, and create another edit widget of the same type, and filling it with the variable, pre-orders. We confirm with OK again, and can then set both label widgets to be hidden. To access the widget content, we need to know the JavaScript selector ID of the two new widgets, which is equal to the widget column number -1. So the first label widget has ID 17, and the second has ID 18. We switch to the variables menu, and create the first calculation variable, by clicking the Add button. We select script variable, and enter as name leverage. This script is intended to calculate the deviation from the monthly average, based on the sales figures of the last 10 years, and then returns a number, greater or less than 0, which is subtracted, or added to the current planned value. Since this is a fictional example, we will skip the calculation and estimate the value to be 1. We return the value, and confirm with OK. We do the same with the pre-orders variable. This would normally be a SQL variable, with a select asking for all pre-orders of this month. Let's pretend the value is 900. We confirm with OK, and switch back to our client-side script. As very last step, we sum up the average value, and the two calculations. We copy the command that reads the widget's content, and paste it twice. We change the selector IDs to 17 and 18, and can then check the result. We enter the same amount, as at the beginning, 7,000, and see the values of the calculations are automatically added to the October value, and also added to the year total. Chapter 3. How to create the sum function over all columns, as shown here in the planning example video. We switch back to the Apparo designer. The output of the sum is done in a widget of the type, label with variables. We need one for the year total, and another 12 for all months of the year. We also need to know all the widths of the widgets, to consider the alignment. The year total has a widget width of 100. And all months a widget width of 80 pixels. Additionally, we need two widgets of the type, spacer and title, for the product column, and for the used spacer. Product has a width of 110. And the spacer uses the default width of 20. We now have all the information we need, and can create all the necessary calculation widgets. The first will be a spacer and title widget, with a width of 110. Then we create a calculation widget of type label with variables. For the yearly total, with a width of 100. We also increase the font size to 16, and change the style from normal to bold. We go to data output format, and change it to number with 2 decimal places, and specify that negative numbers are displayed with a minus sign and in red. When we try to save the widget, we get the error message, that a label requires a value. We simply enter a 0, this also serves as default value. The next calculation widget is a spacer with the default width of 20. Now we create the label for January. We set 0 as label value. And in Visual, we set the width to 80, which is the default value, and again, the font size to 16, and the style to bold. In data output format the same, number with 2 decimal places, and negative numbers with minus sign, and in red. Let's see how it looks so far. Looks good. Now we have to repeat the last step 11 more times. This is how it should look in the end. In the designer we have 15 calculation widgets. 2 spacers, 1 for the year, and 12 for the months. The consecutive numbering starts at 0, 1, 2, 3. Here the 3. The numbers are identical with the corresponding editing widgets. Now it's time for the script. We simply extend the existing script, and continue writing at the end. We create the function calculate column sums, where in the first step, we calculate all monthly sums. For this we need the Apparo function, getAFE table column function, with the parameters, target column selector, which means, for which column we want to make the sum, and the name of the function we want to use. The target element selector is the ID of the January, which has the number 3. We can copy it from the previous script here. The function name here is sum, which sums up all visible widget values of the selected widget. Other possible functions are min for the minimum, which returns the lowest value of all visible widgets in this column. Max for the maximum, which returns the highest value. And a VG for average, which gives the average value over all widget values of this column. For our example we need the sum, so we change it back to sum. With this sum, we fill the variable write sum, which we first have to define. Write sum is equal to the return value of the sum function, plus a semicolon for closing the command. Now the write function. Set a, f, e widget num value. The target element selector is almost the same here, but with a C instead of the E for the calculation area. And as target value, we use the variable write sum. The 2 lines calculate, and write the sum for the month January. We copy these lines, and increase the ID by 1. Then we repeat these steps for all remaining months. This was the first part of the script, calculating the monthly sums. Now the second part, writing the total sum. We use the function, setAFE widget num value, which we can copy from above. The selector ID of the widget for the year is 1. And the value we want to write is the sum of the January column. So we copy it from here. Plus, the sum of the February column, which has the ID 4. Plus, the sum of March, with the ID 5. We will continue like this, until we have added all the monthly sums. The function is now complete, and we close it with a curly bracket. As last part, we add a function, to call the calculation function. On AFE form reload, is a special function, that will trigger every time the form is started or reloaded. When the document is ready, then call the function. Calculate column sum. Then closing all open brackets, and we have finished the scripting part. Let's see if it works. And it works as intended. For more information and a free trial, visit us on apparo.solutions.